A very glorious good afternoon to one and all. Today we all have gathered here for a seminar on Architecture of Hyderabad, a quest for synthesis by Mr. Sajjad Shahid sir. Sir, every Thursday we eagerly wait for eminent personalities like you to have a healthy interaction. Today I would like to convey a message to you on behalf of all the students of Hyderabad Institute of Excellence that we are super excited for your session. Since the historical monuments in Hyderabad like Charminar, Golconda Fort, Chomalla Palace and many more are very close to our hearts, we are delighted to see our today's seminar topic, that is Architecture of Hyderabad, a quest for synthesis. The character of a civilization is engaged in its structures. Now I would like to call our Honorable Principal Ma'am to welcome the gathering.
A very good evening to all of you. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to the 19th episode of our Thursday Table, a series of weekly webinars that we have. And today we have with us a very eminent guest who is a columnist, a historian and an architecture conservator, Mr. Sajjad. And it gives me great pleasure to let you know that I had the good fortune of reading through a few articles of Sir in the Times of India. And being a foodie, one title captured my interest. It talks about the Osmania biscuit. All of you know the Osmania biscuit, isn't it? Boys? Did you know the biscuit had a history? No, I just read through Sir's article and I knew it has a history. It seems it was started by a few dietitians of the Osmania General Hospital as a healthy supplement. Since it's full of energy and it was started as a supplement for the patients. That is the history of the biscuit. And later it was so tasty that the attendants, the people who came there, everybody started tasting it and soon it became a commercial business biscuit, and now I don't feel very guilty eating it, knowing it's healthy. Thank you very much, sir. So on behalf of all of us here, we echo a very warm welcome to you and Mrs. Sajjad. And we also have this time a galaxy of eminent guests with us who are all along with their better halves. And it's the first time that we have so many charming ladies in our audience. So a warm welcome to all of you, and thank you very much Bakkar sir for arranging this beautiful seminar for us. Week after week we are troubling you with this, and thank you very much for this. And I would like to thank Kamarazan sir for the beautiful article that you have written in Siyasat about our previous webinar. Thank you very much, sir. And a warm welcome once again to all the charming ladies and all the guests, our director, our trustee member, and the academic coordinator, principal, staff and students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for addressing us all. Now I would like to call Mr. Abdul Razak sir for the introduction of our today's chief guest.
A very good afternoon, a warm good afternoon to one and all. Honorable Chief Guest, Honorable Principal Ma'am, all the distinguished guests present over here, my dear colleagues and dear students. My name is Abdul Razak Pirzadeh. I feel immensely proud to be a part of such an elite institution that provides the students with great opportunities and to have prolific interactions with hugely noteworthy and influential speakers time and again. Even today, we all have come together here to cherish and motivate these wonderful young minds present over here. Sir, I have a great privilege and I have an overwhelming feeling to have an opportunity to introduce you, sir. So let me introduce our today's honorable chief guest, Mr. Sajjad Shahid, sir. Mr. Sajjad Shahid, sir, is a practicing civil engineer with a keen interest in history, culture, art, and architecture. As a dedicated heritage activist, he has contributed towards increasing awareness for the protection and preservation of built heritage. He has played an instrumental role in a number of conservation projects and has served on various committees as an expert on culture, heritage, and urban history. Mr. Shahid, sir, is a prolific writer, as ma'am rightly said. He's a prolific writer, and his columns and articles are published regularly in the leading newspapers and journals. He lectures extensively on heritage and culture to varied audiences and is presently visiting faculty at the Study India program of the University of Hyderabad, where he teaches a course on art, architecture, and culture of Hyderabad. Mr. Shahid is advisor to the Aga Khan Foundation for the Qutub Shahi tombs restoration project at Hyderabad. He has been a member of the academic senate of the Osmania University and has served on the last heritage committee of Hyderabad. He is the honorary secretary of the Center for Deccan Studies, co-convener of the Indian National Trust of Art and Culture Heritage, INAT, Hyderabad chapter, and trustee of the Nizam's Jubilee Pavilion Trust, that is Nizam's Museum. What a wonderful journey, sir. It is really truly inspirational journey, and this is just a small insight about the wonderful, you can say, journey Mr. Sajjad Shahid sir had so far and still going strong. Yeah. Now, I would like to say a few words to the students in only one line. Students, after reading this introduction, I would like to say, fasten your seat belts and be ready for a wonderful and magnificent session ahead. Without any further ado, let me welcome our today's chief guest, Mr. Sajjad Shahid sir, to come on the stage and grace this occasion with his wonderful speech. So everyone, welcome Mr. Sajjad Shahid.
Good afternoon, and adab sir. Before we begin, I would like to alert you to a couple of problems that might lie ahead. When talking about Hyderabad, I tend to get carried away and lose track of time. So I would request one of the luminaries here, I think I would be better if Mr. Hassan Bakar takes the responsibility of reminding me when I have run out of time. Why Mr. Hassan Bakar? Because if I start boring you all people, he won't wait for the allocated time to end, and before that he'll say your time is over. So, and the next thing is, I wanted to find out whether you will be comfortable with a little Urdu, Hindi, during the course of my presentation. Anyone who has problems understanding Hindi or Urdu? Okay. Because talking about Hyderabad without using Urdu, I think it's a very almost an impossible task. I've been asked to speak on the architecture of Hyderabad and the quest for synthesis. Synthesis is coming together of different entities to form an amalgamation which is enriched, which enriches the two contributing cultures, and the resultant culture itself becomes an identifying element for a people, a city, a state, a country, whatever it may be. So today we'll talk about a quest for synthesis, which is very prominent in the evolution of Hyderabadi architecture. First, we'll have to look at what Hyderabad is. How many of you are aware of your city, the city you are in, or close to which you stay? I hope most of you are familiar with the city of Hyderabad. You are? So, let us look at Hyderabad from a slightly different point of view, from a perspective, a detached perspective. What happens is we get to, take things for granted. We start taking our heritage for granted, the cultural assets for granted, and we develop a sense of, a semi-detachment from our surroundings. It is very important to be aware of what is going on around you and start to asking questions about why things are as they are and what were the contributing factors because of which we have a present situation, we have a present manifestation of art, of thought, of the way we are and the way we live, and why our city is a city which is dear to us, why we respect it, why we like it, why we love it. So we have to understand these things. Sooner or later this thought will come to most of you. Sooner or later in life, all of us come to a stage when we start searching for our roots. Who are we? Why we are who we are? And all this depends on the culture in which you have been growing up, you have been nourished, and from which you have emerged as a representative of that culture. So let us start by looking at what Hyderabad is and why is it important. We cannot talk about Hyderabad without talking about Golconda, because that is where everything started. So it is Golconda, Hyderabad, which is important. And incidentally, Golconda is not just the fort, and or the city that it was, the world city that it was during Qutb Shahi times. Golconda was the name of the kingdom too. So it was a large area which contributed. The influences of this area and the adjoining areas contributed to the evolution of a deep-rooted sense of culture that we have today. The culture that we see today as manifest in our daily life started off because of this culture that evolved from the settlement of Golconda. The town, of course, was the capital city, but also the region of Golconda. Similarly, Hyderabad, till the reorganization of states, it was also a state. Hyderabad was a city and a state. It was only in 1956, when states were reorganized, that it just became a capital city of Andhra Pradesh first, and now it is the capital of Telangana. What are the cultural influences? When a new culture evolves, you need to understand where the influences came from. Turco-Persian, because the rulers the Qutub Shahi dynasty that we know them today were people of Turco-Persian origin. Turco-Persian is a definition of what today is being termed as the Persianate society. It includes influences that came in from Afghanistan, from Central Asia, from the Turkish regions, as well as Persia itself. Persian culture was the dominant culture, and all the other cultures that developed in this area are generally, as a genre, are called Persianate cultures. So that was the main source of influence that came in. Of course, we were in the Deccan, the Deccani, South Indian culture, Indian culture. Then we have Arab influences, because we have South India has had trading links with the Arab world, which dates to prehistoric times. And of course, later on, European influences. Not necessarily with the arrival of the British, mind you, because the Qutub Shahis, the Qutub Shahi Sultans, their ancestors were rulers of a province on the borders of Persia and Georgia and Turkey. So they had ruled over lands which had a large Christian population. More specifically, Armenia. Why is Golconda so famous? What is the thing that attracts people to the word, just the word, mind you, Golconda? People have been fascinated by just the name of Golconda. Why? Of course, diamonds. It was the only known source of diamonds till a long time, till the Brazilian mines were discovered. But more importantly, it became, the term Golconda became a synonym for the best of the best. So even today, when classifying diamonds, the purest diamonds are called diamonds of the first water. The clearest, best diamonds are as a category called Golconda, even though they might have been found anywhere in the world. So that is what was so important about the diamonds of Golconda. Looking beyond the diamonds of Golconda, it was not just the diamonds. What was there? What did we have apart from the diamonds? So I looked up dictionaries, that is where you find definitions. The Oxford Dictionary says that Golconda means source of wealth, advantages, or happiness. That is what Golconda became with time, the term Golconda. Of course, the city always was there. Another dictionary says Golconda means a rich mine, a source of great wealth. And by 1880s, Golconda had become a generic term used by speakers of the English language. Writers in English were using Golconda to mean not just a mine, but to, great wealth, affluence, affluent societies, opportunities, all these were called Golconda. So then the question arises, how many Golcondas are there? Is it only one Golconda that we have here? Anyone knows of any other Golconda? Well, I have found at least half a dozen of them. There is one in Illinois, USA. There is another in Nevada, which I am told is in the middle of nowhere. And Nevada itself is in the middle of nowhere. You have a Golconda Summit, you have Golconda Village in Trinidad Tobago, you have another Golconda in Tasmania. Why? Prosperity, hope. That is what the word Golconda evoked. The emotion that Golconda evoked was that of aspirations, of hope, of riches, of untold wealth. And you have numerous references in the literature picture where Golconda is quoted, not just as a place from where diamonds come, but as, in all those different meanings that it has been given there. Coleridge compares people of Golconda, when talking about readers, he says there are 4 types of reader. One is one who reads everything and tries to memorize everything. Another is one who reads everything but never remembers anything. And then he comes to the end, he says the best reader is one like a worker in the Golconda mines who will pick up, sift through the dirt and pick up the very best. Alexander Dumas has written about Golconda. Emily Dickinson's poem, you have the mention of Golconda. And of course Keats, he says, "As thou from the caves of Golconda a gem." And I'm sure he must have seen this book, which was printed in the 1600s, early 1600s. There was a traveler, Trevanier, who had come here, who used to trade in diamonds. He has mentioned the diamond mines of Golconda, and this woodcut drawing was printed and circulated. The book was circulated first in French, then translated into English. So that Europe came to know of Golconda and its immense wealth, mainly through the writings of the people who had visited Golconda. And as thou from the caves of Golconda a gem, I'm sure he has written this because this is the only illustration of the mines of Golconda, which looked like caves in this point. Now, coming to the topic today, architecture. Architecture, apart from being, a need of mankind, is also a marker of identity of individuals, of groups, of states, of nations, of a group of people. Architecture has been used to convey meaning in various ways. Convey power through huge monumental structures. It has also been used very artfully to convey the high level of development in art that a culture has achieved. So architecture has been used as a weapon both in favor of and against people. Against people by intimidating them, trying to intimidate them, and as art it has been there, letting people enjoy, letting people relish the beauties that can be created by the human mind and the human hand. So, some definitions of architecture. Architecture is the most immediately apparent manifestation of our past. If you want to look at our past, what do? You either have to go to a museum or a library to look at books and manuscripts, or visit some site somewhere. But architecture is all around us. Anyone who is in Hyderabad will have to pass by the Charminar one time or the other in his lifetime, at least. Even if those people who don't want to go to that area, they are living very far away, even they have to transit through the city, and they will pass by some monument, some building. So that is a link with the past, which is most immediately apparent, which cannot be ignored. Other, remains and artifacts have to be seen in museums, you have to make an effort to see them. But architecture is there, immediately apparent, immediately in front of us, to provide that link with the past, which is very essential for our own culture, our own to evolve and develop. Actually, one of the leading architects, he said that architecture should speak of its times and place but it should yearn for timelessness. It should be timeless. That is what great architecture is. You look at the Taj Mahal today, when it was created, it was a beauty. Today, it is a beauty. You look at the Charminar, the day it was created, it was the most impressive building in this area. And even today, it is the most imposing and impressive building in Hyderabad. Another architect says, life is architecture and architecture is the mirror of life. Here we come to a very important aspect where it means that for society, for humanity to develop and evolve from one level to a higher level of sophistication, architecture is indispensable as it records that progress, and it is the mirror of the times. You know, whatever is happening in the times that it is being created, has to be reflected in architecture. Because architecture is not independent. All art forms have a commonality in them. That commonality comes from the culture which is created there. So what is happening in architecture will be happening in literature and poetry of that time. It will be happening in the lives of people of those times. So if you look at Charminar, and you look at the poetry that was being created when the Charminar was being constructed, you'll see a lot of things that are in common. The spirit behind the creation of the Charminar and the spirit behind the poetry of the person who commissioned the Charminar, Muhammad Quli Qutb Shah, the 5th Sultan of Golconda, will have the same markers. The paintings of that time will have the same markers. The music and performing arts will have the same elements, whatever is going on here. To the extent that in medieval Deccan, even mystic thought, mysticism is, Sufism or Bhakti movement, these are the movements that were going on in those times. So when you find synthesis in architecture, you also find synthesis in society. The poets are talking about synthesis. It is evident in the writings, in the paintings, in the music, in the behavior, in the day-to-day life of the people of those times. Whatever is there happening in society is reflected in art forms and more importantly in architecture. So first let us look at the Qutb Shahi period, what was happening here and how it evolved. There was a quest for a unique identity. Every society, every nation desires to have a distinct, identity of its own. And the markers of this identity, one of the very important markers is architecture. Apart from that, we have language as a marker. We have the dominant culture that is there in society as a marker. We have the cultural output of that area as a marker. And there is an individual identity and there is a group identity. Even though your individual identity might be different from the individual identity of other people in the group, the dominant identity will be the identity that needs protection at any given point of time. So when people talk about North and South, you immediately become either a North Indian or a South Indian, depending on where you hail from. Although both of you might be Indian, and if it is South India, you will have a differentiation of being from a particular region. Like I am a Kannadiga, I am from Telangana, I am from Andhra. So regional identity comes into play. So all these identities contribute to the overall emergence of a unique identity for people, for a race, for a community. So we will look, because this is a vast subject, we have to focus down, we look at the Qutb Shahi tombs as a source where we can see this evolution of a distinct style, architectural style for this region, and also the fact that it records a series of buildings, tombs that were constructed in the Qutub Shahi period, record the evolution of a style, which again, lasted, was so cast, so solidly that it lasted till even Sajjad times. So that is what happened. This is a early 19th century painting of the Qutub Shahi tombs. These are tombs, are the mausolea of not just the rulers of the Qutub Shahi dynasty, but their family members, their associates, important people of that area. All of them are buried there. They are not just tombs, there are more than 85, 86 monuments there. There are mosques, there are wells, there are baths, and of course, you have the main tombs there. So we'll be looking closely at the tombs to understand how architecture evolved and what was this quest for individuality, quest for uniqueness, which brought about a synthesis. The synthesis was between what was brought in by the Turco-Persian rulers from their inherited history and what was available in the region here. This is how the tombs look today after a major conservation program that has been going on there by the Aga Khan Foundation on behalf of the Department of Archaeology of Telangana. It will be completed hopefully in another couple of years. Even now most of the main tombs have been finished. So I think a principal man should arrange for a tour of this Qutub Shahi tomb because it's a very important event that is taking place there. The latest technology, the latest methods are being used, of course with traditional modes of construction and material being respected fully. This is the tomb of the first Sultan, the founder of the dynasty, who never claimed to be a Sultan. He always claimed that he was the governor of the region. He was appointed governor somewhere in the 1490s. But by 1512, 1513, and positively by 1516, the Bahmani Empire had totally disintegrated, leaving 5 states. One of the states was Golconda. Before that, Sultan Quli had been the Tarafdar, or governor of this state. If you look at the mausoleum, it's a modest one when compared to others. But basically it follows the lines of the rulers of Bidar, the Bahmanis, whose governor he was. So it is in the same mold. It looks very plain here because this was just after the restoration. The stucco work is not easily visible here because it takes time for the patina to develop and for you to make out the intricate details that are cut up in the plaster, in the lime plaster. It is called stucco plaster. But it is there's quite a lot of embellishment, quite a lot of decoration in it. But not as much as you find in later tombs. But this was the early beginning. So the format it follows the format of the tombs of the kings or the emperors of Bidar, the Bahmani emperors, under whose influence Golconda was one of the subas in those times. So this is Sultan Quli. But then we come to the tomb of his son. Now, Jamshed's tomb is entirely different because suddenly you see a departure from the square tomb of the Bahmanis. You find a sudden change. You see an octagonal tomb, 3 stories at least, even if they are 4 stories, not perfect stories, you have 3 stories, 3 different levels of the tomb. Why is this? Now you have to start asking questions. Why was this sudden departure made? Why? What was the need to change from the set pattern which had been going on for two centuries or more in Bahmani times, and before that in the Sultanate constructions? Why was there a need to depart from it? My own theory is that it was a departure because Jamshed Quli was for the first time tried to assert himself as a ruler, independent ruler. So he wanted a break from continuity from the Bahmani times. He wanted to create a new idiom, a new example for his own family, his own dynasty that was being created. And for that, he had to look at legitimacy. His father was just a governor, but then he had to fall back to his ancestors, one of whom had ruled in the area that I was talking about, the Turco-Persian area, and they had a huge presence in Georgia, Armenia and Georgia. And the mausoleum of their forefathers in Armenia bears a remarkable resemblance to the tomb of Jamshediyah. So that is what he was trying. He was trying to establish his legitimacy to being a hereditary ruler by harking back at the time when his ancestors were rulers. But unfortunately for him, he was not loved by the people. His rule was very short, 7 years. He was accused of being party to the murder of his father, who was assassinated in the Golconda Mosque. The charge leveled against him by his brother was that he has not punished the person who murdered his father properly. So that was the ambiguity there, and the short period that he ruled was not good for the people of the region too, so that everyone wanted to forget him. So that legacy which he wanted to create could not be sustained, and the next ruler again reverts to the square plan, but then with differences. The brother who had been banished, Ibrahim, he had to flee to the neighboring Hindu kingdom of Vijayanagara. He took refuge there. He stayed there 7 years. He married a princess from Vijayanagar. And when he came back with a baggage of newly acquired culture. He had become acquainted with Telugu. He was a patron of Telugu poets. He was a patron of the stone carvers, beautiful stone carvings that first Warangal, Kakatiyan Warangal, and then later Vijayanagara was famous for. He had developed a taste for music, the other performing arts. Kuchipudi received a boost in his time. Dance form was Kuchipudi. And he was so famous as a patron that Kuchipudi dance in those days, and it continued till recent times, began with an invocation to Ibrahim. He is referred to in Telugu poetry, which sung along with Kuchipudi dances, as Malik Abhirama. Ibrahim has been transformed into Abhirama there. Malik Abhirama. And there is a full invocation in Telugu which is read before Kuchipudi dance performance begins. So that was the change that came about. So what was happening? Here there was a ruler now who was familiar with the local culture, with the culture that was prevalent among the masses. He was trying to patronize it. You have to patronize it because you are a new person, you have a new culture, you develop a taste for a culture, you become absorbed in that culture, you absorb from that culture, and what happens is, finally, you bring about a synthesis, a mixing of cultures. And whatever happens, two great cultures, when they come together, the resultant is always something which is better, which is sweeter, which is more evolved than the contributing cultures. And that is what happened. We have Ibrahim Qutb Shah's doorway carved stone. For the first time, we see stone carving coming into play in the monuments of Hyderabad. Stone carving art had been restricted till then to temple architecture. Shilpakars used to carve these stones for temples, the 1,000-pillar temple or the temples of Vijayanagara, Hampi. You see them, a beautiful carved stone work, and that you find manifest in the door jamb of Ibrahim's tomb. You also see a border, black basalt border, a very tough stone, very difficult to carve. You know, North India had it easy, the Mughals had it easy, they were carving in marble, in red sandstone. The Kalakars of the Deccan were carving in tough materials, granite, black basalt. So these were superior craftsmen. Their craft was positively more difficult, and that was being recognized by the rulers. And you have the first signs of synthesis, use of stone carving, overlapping of Persian and Indian temple motifs and elements, and of course temple motifs coming into play. The designs, the patterns used in temple construction first appearing in Islamic architecture of the Deccan. A very commonly encountered motif. You find it in a lot of Orissa temples. It is called the Gajasimha motif. So now I was talking about how you try to speak in the language of those whom you are addressing. If I say something and you don't understand it, what is the use of my speaking? Famous poet Ghalib wrote very difficult poetry. Even I cannot understand most of it even today. One of his contemporaries said, ज़बाने मीर समझे और कलामे मीरज़ा समझे, मगर इनका कहा ये आप समझे या खुदा समझे। ठीक है, ये समझते हैं या ऊपर वाला समझता है और कोई नहीं समझ सकता है। तो उस तरह की बातों को लैंग्वेज ऑफ आर्किटेक्चर भी एक चीज है। There is a language which you have to use, which you have to have command over to convey what you know to others. जब भी मजा है ना, मजा तब है जब एक कहे और दूसरा समझे। ये नहीं कि आप जो बात करें आप ही समझे कोई और नहीं समझे। So here what was happening was there was this existing iconography, existing motifs. इसका कुछ माने थे। इसके माने क्या थे? There was a Hindu resurgence against Buddhists in India, shortly preceding the invasion or whatever you call it of Muslims from outside. And this reassertion of Hinduism was depicted in this form. If you look at the center, you have something like a tree. It's not a tree, it's a Dvaja Stamba. You go to any temple, you will find a pole with these cross arms on it, which is installed as the first step when constructing a temple. So that is a Dvaja Stamba, which shows Hinduism, which implies that it is Hinduism. And Hinduism is being attacked by the elephant. That is the symbol for Buddhism. And the lion is trying to protect Hinduism. That is the Simha. So it is an attempt at portraying the quest to recapture India by the Hindus after it had gone over to the Buddhists. Eventually they succeeded. So what do we do with the symbol? The symbol is there, it is the mind of everyone. How do I use it? I have to use it because I have used it. How I have used it? This on the top, of course you have, what you see is from the Banjara Darwaza of Golconda. The same thing you can find, this is called a kashti, you go to some Dargah, if you happen to go, I know most of you might not be going there, but you have this is the Kashti in the Gulbarga Dargah. There's a parrot also on it, but there is also the Gajasimha on it. The parrot, because the parrot is there's a belief, there's a sugar, lal shakar, which is put in that, and people take it from there. When children have difficulty in speaking, they stutter. These mothers go there and take a pinch of the red sugar from there and feed it. That is the belief. They say that their children start to speak like parrots. Whatever that may be, but the point is, you have the Gajasimha on it. Similarly, the spandrel of the main arch to the Dargah. On the right, the spandrel motif is again the elephant and the lion attacking. Also, you have, of course, that is a different story. I use it as a filler, but the elephant motif, stylized one, is used even in mosque. It is not an elephant, if you see, but it is in the shape of an elephant tusk, which is supporting the chhaja of a mosque. So these motifs have been used. And here, I don't know, I have not seen it, but I have put forth a theory. I am waiting for it to be challenged, because in academic circles that is what has happened. You put forth a theory, then people challenge you, and in the result that you get enriched by what people write against you. My theory is how this motif was reinterpreted. Iconic figure was reinterpreted by the Muslim rulers for their own use. So now here you have Muslim rulers using a pure icon or a pure motif from a struggle which happened between Buddhists and Hindus. They have nothing to do with it. But how do I justify using this? My personal theory, sir, I would like to share it with the people and scholars and luminaries here, is that this was an interpretation of Surah Fil. And Ali, the fourth Caliph, or the first Imam, as some people would address him, was born inside the Kaaba. And Ali is also known as Asadullah, the Lion of God. And what does the surah say? Ashab al-Fil, people of the elephant, they attacked the Kaaba. And then Kaaba was defended by, of course, the Almighty. But because it is the birthplace of Hazrat Ali, here there was a depiction that Ali is the savior of the Kaaba and of Islam. That was the image that was being represented there and used. This is still a first theory which has been put through. I have not received any objections as yet, but I am sure very soon people will start writing, because unfortunately very less work has been done on figurative analysis and iconography as far as Islamic culture, the Deccan is concerned. वैसे ही Deccan पे कोई काम ही नहीं करता, इन चीज़ों पे, इन पहलुओं पे बहुत काम हुआ. We come to the tomb of Muhammad Quli Qutb Shah, the founder of Hyderabad, the greatest poet, the first poet of Urdu. Of course, Urdu was then known as Lakhani. Later on, much later, it came to be known as Urdu. He was a great poet. He was a great builder. He is the person who laid out the city, founded the city of Hyderabad, the Charminar, the Ashokana, Bashai Ashokana, and most of the other buildings came up in his time. And of course, they were added to by later things. So we saw that Ibrahim's marriage to a Hindu princess and the resultant influence on the Qutb Shahi court continued. After all, Muhammad Quli was the son of a Hindu lady, so he had that influence, and he very proudly says that I'm the proud son of a Hindu mother in one of his poems. What did he do? He brought about more elaborate examples of synthesis. And for that you have to look closely at the tomb. I have taken the only center of it. What is happening here? This is the tomb of Muhammad Wali in the tomb complex. You see that you have prominent stone carving. Stone is now gaining strength. Before it was only plastered with sparing use of stone as borders or in the doorways. What you have here, the entire corner minarets are in carved stone. Most of the lintels are in carved stone. Then you have also the arch is a simulated arch. True arch is an arch which carries a load. Simulated arch has been in India. The true arch was brought into India by the Muslims when they came over because they brought in Roman and Greek technology into India. Although it's surprising, Greeks ruled India for 200 years, but they didn't transfer the technology to India. It was only Muslims who brought in Greek and Roman construction technology into India. You find the true arch only after Muslims come in. But here there is a fallback. You're going back to an age when the profile of the arch was recreated a lot of times. But it was not a true arch. It was not a load-bearing arch. People, students who go on to do engineering will understand the concept of load dispersal in a curvilinear manner, which is what the Greco-Romans did and which was predominantly used by Islamic architects, and the trabeated system, lintel and post, column and beam, which is now, that is a direct transfer method. There were limitations on that. For last spans, you had to go in for curvilinear services. So, but here you find simulated arches, false arches, which are just profile of arches in stone. Then you have the trabeated post-lintel system. You see the columns in stone and the brackets on top. All of that is non-curvilinear. It's a straight lintel and post method of construction. So now construction methodology was also undergoing synthesis. The architects of Islamic style architects were now relying on local technology, local methods of construction too. They were starting to appreciate it. That is what is visible there. Overall, it is a super example of synthesis, one of the best examples of synthesis in architecture, in construction technology that you can come across. Of course, later on tombs, the entire lower floor is clad in granite. And you also have very fine carvings. The spandrel carvings are very tough to carve, but they are done in granite here. Then you come to the most elegant tomb of Hyderabad. Anyone knows where this is? This is not in the Sajjad Tombs complex. Yes, it is at least one person who knows. It is the Dargah of Hazrat Shah Raju, incomplete tomb of a Sufi saint, Shah Raju Mukhtar Hussaini, whose Dargah is near Misriganj. Actually, I think it is called Shamsher, it is next to Misriganj. But yes, you are right. Generally, the area is called Misriganj. It is the grandest tomb that the Qutb Shahis built. Unfortunately, it was not completed. The point is, you don't find it so imposing as the others because it is on the ground level. All others have a high plane. Why do they have a high plane? They were planned tombs. These Qutb Shahi rulers constructed their own tombs before their death. And they were buried in the lower floor on the ground. So they had huge plains. Here, the Sufi was already buried. It was only after his death that Rana Shah, the last ruler, started construction of the tomb. So he couldn't afford to have an elevated structure over it and then have a false grave there that like people also constructed the graves. The fog graves is on the first floor. You go to the Taj Mahal, The top one, the grave you see is the false grave. The actual grave is underground, another floor. Even the Qutub Shahi tomb, most of the graves are in the basement, in the cellar. But here, they had a problem, they couldn't do that. He was already buried there. They could not go about constructing all around him. So the restrictions were there. So this is the method. What do you find here? A total change. The entire wraparound veranda, the ground floor, and of course the walls also. Very insensitively, the people there have painted the lower floor. The lower floor is the entire stone carving because they wanted to make it look beautiful. They have painted it all on the ground. Upper floor is, of course, lime plaster. The lower floor is totally stone carved. And you have the same post and lintel type of construction. So this is the pinnacle, the peak of the development of architecture. Now you have many other examples. I could have shared that, but then that would need at least a dozen lectures to go through the details of Hyderabad architecture. That is why I chose only tomb architecture, and now we'll talk about the Asif Jai period, but there also we'll start with tomb architecture, then we'll look at a few of the buildings. But before that, we'll look at in detail at the buildings themselves. Stucco work, this is all in plaster, cut plaster work. Now this is what is being restored, and you have markers. The beauty of Dakkani poetry is that it is rooted in the region. Local flora, local fauna, local folk heroes. In Dakkani poetry, you will rarely come across the mention of Laila Majnu or Shiri Farhad. We will always talk about Ram and Sita or some other local, Radha Krishan. Dakkani poetry will always talk of that. Dakkani poetry will not talk about exotic birds from Persia or from other parts of the world. They talk about our own flora and fauna. Dakkani poetry talks about Kevada. Dakkani poetry talks about Genda. Dakkani poetry talks about lotus, Kamal. All things which people can immediately relate to. They do not go into abstract like Ghalib has done. सब कहाँ कुछ लाल हो गुल में नुमाया हो गई. He says everything is not been obvious. It's only few things which we see in the shape of Lala and Gul. Lala is tulip and Gul is a rose. He might have seen a rose, but where do you say he has seen a tulip? I think it was not possible. I have no record. I have not come across any record of his ever going to Kashmir, because the Mughals did try to cultivate the tulips in Srinagar, but Khalid has never gone there. He's only heard of them or seen them, some paintings of them. He's talking very confidently of Lala Gul. Now Lala Gul, he might be a rich fellow, he might have gone there and see, he might have been supported by the king, but the common man will not understand that. The common man understands what he sees, what is, immediately apparent to him. And that is why Dakkani poets are talking about that, and Dakkani architects are absorbing the elements around you and putting them in their manifestation so that you can relate. अरे ये अपनी चीज़ है. अगर यहाँ आप जो है एक alien bird को बिठा दें जो आप जानते ही नहीं हैं, some might be a beautiful Puma bird, I won't appreciate it. If you put a peacock in front of me, I'll appreciate this. I know this. I know what this is, and I know the beauty of a peacock. I don't know the beauty of a Huma, but although it comes in, it has been mentioned frequently in Persian, of course, and Urdu also. But I have not seen a Huma, but I have seen a peacock. So that is what is great about architecture of the Deccan, poetry of the Deccan, and cultural contributions of the Deccan. So you see, all the birds depicted will be from the region. Lotus petals. Of course, the lotus is not unique to India. Even Persian art has a lot of depictions of lotus. It's quite I give you one example. But lotus became a very common source of inspiration for embellishing in architecture and buildings. So you have lotus petals as the base of the dome, and lotus is used in a lot of other places also. The finial of an arch, often, I think every art critic has said that it is a lotus bud that you find there. But recently I came across an article where I was told that it is actually a torch, flaming torch, because that was the symbol of the Khara Khalil, the ancestors of Sajjad Shahid. I don't know, I have to work on that more. But then, this is a detail of the work on the base of the dome. Now, what do you find there? Anything that you can identify? Suvan Poli, the third king, he was a boy king, he ruled for only 7 or 8 months. 1550. Naturally, he was very young. His tomb must have been constructed in the next period. Outer limit, 1560. So this tomb and the decoration on it was completed in 1560. Don't you know anything special on that? I draw your attention to the pineapples. You see pineapples there? The pineapple came to India in 1550. The Dutch bring it to South India. Portuguese and Dutch. And then it moves inland. Within 10 years, you find it depicted on the Qutub Shahi tombs. It was an exotic fruit at that time, and the texture and the design you find on the pineapple is really, fascinating. So with any new thing you are fascinated. It was an exotic fruit, only fit for kings. But incidentally, there is a very beautiful poem by a Telugu poet of Ibrahim's time, who was patronized by Amin Khan, one of the nobles. Patancharu, Aminpur. Aminpur के अमीन खां के पास एक पोएट थे तेलुगु. Ponaganti Telangana. He has written a full poem on in praise of Amin Khan. In that there is one full stanza on Amin Khan's garden. And Amin Khan's gardens, he mentioned that among the various things that are there are I think 23, 24 varieties of fruits and other trees mentioned there, which have been identified. Pineapple is also mentioned there. So, Amin Khan was a noble of Ibrahim's time. And Ibrahim ruled from 1550 to 1580. So we can positively say that before 1580, the pineapple not only found its place on the domes, but it was also being grown in Patancharu. So this is what you learn from architecture. Had I not seen there, I would not have gone and inquired when pineapple came to India, when it came to Hyderabad, how is it that you have the pineapple here? So these are the things that you should start asking whenever you see a monument. You just don't look at it, say, beautiful, and move on. You look at the various elements and try to see if they are telling a tale, if they are speaking to you, if they are conveying the story of a time, if they are conveying record of an important event, such an important event like an exotic South American fruit, which incidentally is being now sold for 5 rupees in Hyderabad, that's a different thing. But then, when it came here, it must have been something, even the potato, the humble potato, when it came into India, it was so rare that our people, when Wajid Ali Shah moved to Mitiapur, they had started adding potatoes to their biryani. They still have potatoes in their biryani. And we might laugh at that, but then for them, it was so because potatoes came to that region during the time, and they were grown there during that time, and they were very expensive. You can't imagine that now. The cheapest, one of the cheapest foodstuffs that you get The potato was an exotic thing in a particular period of time. So all these things come to you through manifestations in food, like in the biryani of our, or in pineapples. I think I'll have to hurry. And also, the inspiration for the designs, they come from jewelry. Jewelry of this area. You see a bangle. In Dagni poetry, that is called Karela Thar Kada. Kada. And of course, different aspects, you can look at them and see the flower motif there is also similar to that. Now this is a stucco decoration of an arch. Of course, the white thing that you see is the restored version. The craftsmen have been working to repair it and bring it back to the original. I think they have succeeded remarkably in that conservation effort. The darker portions are what was still left there. That was copied. I did one thing, I inverted that image so that I can understand the motives there, the use of, where did the inspiration for those designs come from? I think some of them may come from jewelry, chains. You vision that as a neck with a necklace with a tiered off pendant. Or tops with larza. So the inspiration comes from local music. That is what you see there. That is where synthesis comes. Then you have the Toli Masjid, one of the most beautiful mosques in Hyderabad. And it is full of exquisite, superb stucco. I have not seen such beautiful stucco anywhere till now. But the most important thing here is again the conveyance of one thought using symbolism of another thought. You see the base of the minar there is in the shape of a quad. Now does that remind you of something? There is a thing called a Purana Kalasa, which is found everywhere, which was there earlier in the Andhra Pradesh emblem also. It's considered to be an auspicious. So you hear Purana Kalasa, you find that with a kalpalata, vine that goes up. That's also symbolism from, and it's found in Islam, Persian art as well as in Indian art. Those depictions are being used here to convey the concept of Islam, of light. Minar, the word minar derives from nur. So here, I believe is the interpretation of the surah, ayat of the surah, it says Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. So the earth is firmly fixed in the bottom of it, and the minar is going upwards. I think we have run out of time, so I'll have to rush through the rest of it. We have to have an interactive session also. So this is some of the symbolism, some of the iconographic adaptations that were there, or reinterpretation of iconography. Another view of Toli Masjid, the beautiful carvings, embellishment is there on temples. Profuse embellishment is on mostly on temples, and from there it is drawn. This is the Toli Mosque, Kulsumpura. It's near Kulsum, on the Karwan Road. Asif Jai period. Initially it was Qutub Shahi buildings were reused. 1740 early attempts at Deccan revival. They were trying to revive Deccan because they were trying to separate them and distance themselves from the Mughal Empire, which was still existing. 1803, the British came in, the residency was established here, so British influences came in a big way. 1857, the Mughal Empire ended. So there was a question, dilemma. If we still start calling us as Mughal, the British might say that now that the Mughals are not there, you are our vassals. So there was an attempt to revive again British Qutub Shahi architecture and claim, that we are the inheritors of Qutub Shahi. But then by 1880, there was a feeling that no, we are the inheritors. We are the last surviving facets, the last surviving group which is still in power, which belongs to the old Mughal, nobility. So again, there is a reascension in 1880. In 1900, Indo-Saracenic comes in a big way. This is something which was introduced by the British to counter Indian nationalistic feelings, but it backfired on them. It was taken by Indians in a major way. And then, of course, in 1912 onwards, we have an emergence of a distinct style for Hyderabad, which we call the Osmanian style. We look at that briefly. Early tomb, Malakha's tomb, 1800, purely Mughal influence architecture. By towards the middle of the 19th century, 1850s and all, Abulullah Dargah in Agapura Dargah, what is known as, you have the main building which is still influenced by North Indian architecture, but to the right and left, the Pardawal Minar, typical Qutub Shahi arts is there. So Qutub Shahi presence still dominant in this area. It's a beautiful dargah, you should visit it especially during the times of Urs when it is very beautifully decorated. One of the largest collection of chandeliers in Hyderabad, and it's on display during this. Of course, final culmination, very strong assertion. In 1900, you have Saidani Imam's tomb, where you have a claim to all the contributing cultures, where the Hyderabad culture says that we are successors to not only Qutub Shahis, but Mughals, and also the entire region. Baimani, all the regions of the Deccan, we are there, and everything is contributing towards the creation of the region. And of course, the resurgence of Qutub Shahi, climax of the revival of Qutub Shahi architectural trends was the Mafrulmul tomb, which is there on near Sanatala. It was not a one-way, it was two-way exchange. Even Hindu religious spaces were being impacted by this synthesis. Kesagatta, you have the Gopuram, but you also have a secondary building, which is a typical Mughal influence style. I'm just rushing through so that you can have a look. Sitaramba, lower level, total dividend temple architecture, first floor totally Mughal Rajput Mughal style, Islamic architecture, Qasba arch, all that. You have a strange structure which shows the period of turbulence when people were thinking of both Kakatiyan, Mughal, Europeans. So Europeans are also making a presence here. Look at the windows there. And of course the column with the linear decorations. So you have every type of architecture being represented in the archway of this temple. 1857 is a major change period for Hyderabad. That is the 5th Nizam, this is the 6th Nizam. Just look at the change in dress. And you can imagine how the European influences had crept into the life of Hyderabadis. Now it starts from the king, it trickles down to the nobility and then to the common man. So, and I think today most of us sit on tables to dine, So that is what is happening. The way we dress, most of it is, that change was brought about during Mehdi Bai's time. Of course, the buildings also. Chowmalla Palace, you go in, Afzal Mahal, purely European design. Victoria Zanana, Gothic art is pure Gothic art, which is rarely found in Islamic architecture. It is found in some places, but mostly it is found in churches. Then what happens is you have 1903 Delhi Darbar. Nizam, 6th Nizam goes there, and in front of everyone, including the British present there and all the nobility of India, he is declared, or he had been declared, but he is presented as the premier noble of India. the premier prince of India. And there you see him in the center. What is remarkable about his dress? Yes, one, it is Sherwani. Second, it is the minimalist. You know, there's a trend in architecture which is minimalist. He is not wearing any jewels. He has no elaborate decorations in his Sherwani. His is the plainest looking dress, and by that he is standing out. He is making his presence felt. I have been felt there. I believe when people ask him, you are the wealthiest man, you are the greatest ruler, you are the biggest state, what are you doing dressed here? Like, where are your jewels? So he pointed out to his nobles who are following him. He says, these are my jewels. By that he implied that he had such great people with him. And also he had ordered all his nobles to wear their best jewelry. So well, you are wearing jewelry, my nobles are wearing it, so I need not wear it. But then this also had an effect on his psyche. He said, enough of British domination in our culture, we will start asserting ourselves. I think that is where it started, and of course it culminated in a number of skirmishes between Usmani Khan and the British. So what did he do? He reverted from European architecture back to vernacular architecture. CIB building, this is the principal's office of Gandhi Medical College, which is barely surviving today. I don't know when it will be knocked over, but this is one of those examples. Devdi Nazar in Begambed, which is now Shiran Fort Club, half of it is Paiga, Shadi Khan. So again, an assertion of, but then again, by the end of his rule, he had come to firmly believe that Qutub Shahi architecture is superior and more adapted to the local environment and climate. And that is why when this Indo-Saracenic just started and this reassertion was there, this is a great example of early Indo-Saracenic and the Mevuli era, where Indianness was being asserted in form and in elements, whereas the modern elements of interiors and layout were being brought in from European architecture. Of course, a lot of things changed after the Delhi Darbar, I told you. For the first time, you have the Charminar appearing on Hyderabad coins. This happened towards the end of Mevuli. As I told you, it is not just buildings. Every aspect of culture is portrayed in the objects that are produced and in the cultural output of a particular age. So what was happening in this area, in this time, was that the Nizam was trying to reassert himself as the authentic ruler, unchallenged ruler of the Deccan, and that is why the Charminar comes into prominence again. And with the Charminar comes the fallback again, Mevuli Baja's buildings. You see the stone coming into prominence. Carved stone, stone carving, which is the local speciality, again comes to the fore. And then you have the Town Hall, Legislative Assembly building, which is the climax of his period, the last building of his time. Next we have Usman Ali Khan taking over after the death of Mevuli Pasha in 1911. What do you note here? This is the Darbar, Coronation Darbar, Indian Coronation Darbar. Everyone is dressed in a Sherwani except for this person here. Who is that? Yes, Maharaja Krishan Prasad Bahadur, who refused to give in to these new influences of the British and continued to wear the old Mughal dress. That is why on his death, Nizam remarked, Mughal Bisat ka aakhri mohra rukhsat hua. He said the last piece of the Mughal chessboard has departed. That was what Usman Ali Khan did. Because while everyone changed, Maharaja remained very firm about his culture. Of course, he also started wearing Sherwani, but then at court appearance, he was always dressed in the traditional Mughal style. Usman Ali Khan brought in an architect whose name was Vincent Ash. And he gave us 5 landmark buildings which changed the face of Hyderabad and which set a precedent for all buildings constructed thereafter till 1948 to follow in his footsteps. Even the greatest architects of the world could not get away from this image, from this trend that had been created by Usman Ali Khan. Of course, I personally feel, I have proof for that. This is not a time I have an article which some of you might read if you want to, where it says that more than Ash, it was the choice of Usman Ali Khan. He may have drawn the buildings, he may have created them, but the thought behind that was the personal thought of Usman Ali Khan for various reasons which I have cited. So these are the 5 great buildings that Ash gave us. And just look at what is happening. That is the last great monumental building of 6th Nizam. This is the first monumental building of Usman Ali Khan's time. What is the difference? Massing is the same, form is the same, you have the same portico, you have the same central rise, you have the same dome. There and here, what is common is the central tower, the dome of the central tower. If you look at that, and then you just, in your mind, go back to the tomb of Jamshed that I showed you, which differs from all other tombs. These are replicas from that. Hyderabad has drawn tremendously from that aberration that you find in Sajjad Shahid. It became one of the favorite elements to be copied by later architects. Hyderabad Public School, Edge Building, my hospital, Edge Building, some of the other buildings that were done by PWD department. But they had to follow in the footsteps of Edge. They couldn't get away. आप देखिए यूनानी दवाखाना it's almost the same. Even Jasper, who designed the Arts College, he could not get away fully from that pattern that had been created by Ash. So you have, although he tried to bring in US here, there was a new attempt. Here was an attempt by Hyderabad ruler Usman Ali Khan to claim the leadership of Pan-Islamic world, the entire Islamic region, by family ties, by marriage ties with the Caliph's daughter. So here there was this staking of claim to being the most powerful person in the Islamic world. That is why you have Mamluk architecture, one of those beautiful phases of architecture and Islamic architecture, taking center stage there. Then you have the lower Kakatiyan and Vijayanagara, as I told you, post and later. And the first floor is the curvilinear, arch style. All of them coming together very beautiful. Arts College has been called a symphony in stone. It's one of the most beautiful buildings. But even that, Ernest Jasper couldn't get away from the mold that had been created by Ash. But you always have people who go against the mainstream, who bring in some relief. The monotony is broken by someone doing something odd. And if that odd thing happens to be something beautiful, you end up appreciating it. So what you have here is the Spanish mosque. Actually, it's not Spanish, that's a misnomer. It is a Turkish design, which has been brought in by the Begumpet old airport in front of that. And of course, there were a lot of things happening in the Deccan. Ajanta and Ellora were the focus of attention from 1918 to 1940. Entire resources of Hyderabad archaeology and arts and culture were spent on Ajanta, Ellora, which unfortunately is no longer with us. The arch, Chaitya arch of Ajanta is now depicted in Hyderabad building. This is the Ibrahim Lines, Golconda cantonment. And then you had current European trends also reflected in Hyderabad. This is what is called an Art Deco building. Art Deco was very popular. It started in Germany in that area. And we had during the war, the Second World War, a lot of people were quarantined or something. They were not allowed to leave. So there were Polish and German architects who had come for some work in Hyderabad, and unfortunately for the course of the war they had to stay here. जा नहीं सकते थे, यहाँ से फंस गए, जैसा कोरोना में फंस गए हैं कई लोग, कुछ अमेरिका जाके कुछ वहाँ से आए, तो इसी तरह फंस गए थे वो लोग। अब ये बेचारे अब हैदराबादी रहम जल्दी खाते, तो बोले अरे कुछ करना है इनको, अपन काम देना, तो these people started giving them commissions. So you had a lot of numerous beautiful art deco buildings which have now been demolished. This is one of the best and purest, of course. They had made some changes here, so it did not remain a true art deco here, but I and somewhere everyone here, most of them will know this building. It was a beautiful house called Kohinoor, where unfortunately it was demolished and GBK 1 stands there today. So this is a beautiful art deco. And Hyderabad के लोगों को हमेशा एक नया नाम देने का शौक होता है, इसको हैदराबाद में जर्मन डिजाइन होता है. And a lot of other people followed that. Whenever you had a curved staircase or a round window, people said, oh, German design ka ghar. So the Art Deco and Art Nouveau were generally known as German design houses in Hyderabad. आज भी पुराने लोग German design का घर ही बोलते हैं. There still are some very beautiful German design houses left in Banjara Hill. We come to the last great construction of the Asif Jais, the 8th Nizam, Nawab Mir Barkat Ali Khan Bahadur, constructed this beautiful mosque in the Shiraz Palace. Shiraz Palace has its mosque, of course, now it is open to public. Earlier, only Fridays it was open. There was no population all around. It was a beautiful place in those times, still is a very beautiful place. This is a complete departure. This just gives a hint of what could have happened in Hyderabad had things not changed. Because here is an entirely different interpretation of Noor. The Minar here is entirely different, you know. There were slots with lights in there. It was virtually Noor being depicted in those Minar. And a beautiful, even structural wise, anyone who appreciates engineering problems will realize that this is a very, very difficult structure to design and execute. It's a beautiful mosque, Shiraz Mosque in Punjab. With that, we come to an end. Thank you for patience hearing. I think I have exceeded my time despite Hassan Bhai signaling time and again. Stop. And I apologize if I have run over my time, if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, sir, for addressing us all. Sir, we have a small interactive session. So friends, if you have any questions, you can ask to sir.
Had Humayun not gone to Iran when after starting Shweta story, do you think that the following aspects would have been different? Because he, as you said, he could get influences from abroad, so why went to Iran and he must have wanted to get a structure within the whole copy of Persian?
I don't think much would have changed because, as I told you, all the societies, including the place from where the Mughals came, were designated as Persianate societies, where Persian culture was already prevalent, where Persian was the language, official language at least, where Persian art was being replicated or adopted or interpreted in a different way, but it was basically Persian art. Because one small point which I would like to draw your attention to is the tiles that you find on the top of tombs. In Qutub Shahi tombs also you had tiles at one time, all the tombs were covered with tiles. We are trying to find sponsors for one of the tombs, Sultan Muhammad Shah, the 6th Sultan. His tomb has pieces left there where we have samples, where we have proof that there were green tiles installed there. So if that comes through, we will redo the tiles there. We know by his own poetry and by written record that Muhammad Quli's tomb had sky blue tiles on it, but we cannot put that because we don't have any evidence on site. Conservation is done by them. Coming back to your question, Persia has the blue tiles. The entire Central Asia, you have the same blue tiles there, and almost similar domes. Of course, the domes of Moscow are slightly different, but the Central Asian domes, the covering of the domes is the same. And I always make it a point to remind people that the domes, the beautiful domes of Iraq, Baghdad, or the Central Asian provinces that you see are not the original dome. They have been redone time and again. Almost 99.9% of the time the tiles are new tiles. But they have maintained it regularly, on a regular basis. So before losing all the evidence, they redid it. Unfortunately, here we have lost too much. So there's only one place that it is possible, that is the tomb of Sultan Muhammad Qutb Shah. I have in my recommendation said that we have to redo it. It was not slated in the original estimate. They are trying to find sponsors. And if that happens, we make the tiles here in Hyderabad with the use of technology, same technology. We will bring in the experts from Iran because Aga Khan spares no money when it comes to authenticity. So we will do all that if we are allowed by financial support and by the other people. There's a panel of experts who decide whether it can be done. So basically, I think Humayun's going there, of course, did have a major impact because one of the things that happened was a change from Sunnism to Shiaism that he made. Because of that, society became a lot more tolerant and remained more tolerant till just before the end, when there was again a hardening of stances. But borrowings from Iran had been there always. There is no period in which there was a complete break from Iran as such. Someone was supposed to ask a question there.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Abdul Mukhir from 11th standard. As you in the field of history from many time, I just want to ask a question about what's the history behind Kohinoor, sir?
Kohinoor?
Yes, sir, that time.
Well, the 10 books written, the latest is by one, William Dalrymple, and some lady has written a book. It's totally confusing. You cannot be sure. You have the description of a lot of stones that Tavernier saw and bought in the Deccan. Sketches are there in the book. But they are uncut pieces. What happened to them after they were cut, you cannot be sure. The size of Kohinoor as recorded in various times is different. There are two theories mainly which run through. There is no doubt that it is from Golconda. Golconda meaning the mines of Paritala in the near Guntur, in that area, Krishna belt. So that is undisputable. But the point that whether it was taken by Khilji from the Warangal Kakatiyan kings to North India, or it went as booty from Golconda to the Mughals, that is debatable. Both times, a lot of gems and jewels have gone in there. There is a record of Malik Kafur taking a lot of gems. One of them may have been the Kohinoor, which he took from Warangal. It can also have been gems that were taken. So you cannot be sure 100% about the Kohinoor. Eventually, it's in the crown jewels, and now I'm told India is going to wear it very soon. I don't know. So that is a very ambiguous thing. You cannot be sure about the Kohinoor. But there are hundreds of other diamonds which we are very sure of, which are from Kohinoor. You just Google or you look at Umar Khaledi's book on diamonds of Kohinoor. Very detailed.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Well, I was expecting some questions at least.
Maybe I can stand for one of them. There's a very hot question going on, very controversial, about the name of the city of Hyderabad, that political shock fell in love with a girl called Iconography, and then the name was, I mean, the very political question is going on in social circles. What is your opinion?
Given the prevailing political situation, I would not like to comment in detail on that, sir, because my views are quite different from what are generally doing the rounds these days. They are too polarized, this thing that one it was Bhagmati, and then suddenly that Bhagmati gets transformed into a goddess Bhagyalakshmi, so all those things have been happening. Basically, as far as Bhagnagar is concerned, not Bhagyanagar, Bhagnagar. Bhagnagar is the Telugu version, I believe, from what my reading is, of the sobriquet for Hyderabad itself. Hyderabad points at the legend Hyderabad Farfunda Bunyad. फरफुंदा बुनियाद का तर्जुमा तेलुगु में या यहाँ की ज़बानों में वो भागनगर हुआ, जहाँ की किस्मत लोगों की जाग जाती है, अच्छी किस्मत वाला है, वहाँ से भागनगर है वो। ये हिस्टोरिक फैक्ट है, आपको कई जगह मिलेगा, सोर्सेज में, फॉरेन सोर्सेज में मिलेगा, लोकल सोर्सेज में मिलेगा। और सबसे अहम सबूत जो मैं समझता हूँ, अभी मैं जिक्र कर रहा था उसको भाई से, मैंने कहा कि काजी महमूद बहरी एक बहुत बड़े दक्कनी के शायर गुजरे हैं, जिनकी दो किताबें आमतौर पर बहुत ज़्यादा मतलब अपने ज़माने की बेस्ट सेलर समझी है। फ़ारसी में है उरूस इरफान, जिसका उन्होंने दक्कनी में तर्जुमा किया है, जिसका नाम है मन लगन। वही चीज़ वो दोनों जगह लिखते हैं। वाक़या ये है कि वो गोगी शरीफ में रहते थे, उनको वहाँ से यहाँ जब हालात बिगड़े वहाँ, तो उनको यहाँ बुलाया, किसी यहाँ के जो गवर्नर थे, जो थे, उनकी दावत पे हैदराबाद आ रहे थे, तो रास्ते में वो डाकू लूट लिए उनको, जो भी कुछ उनको वहाँ के बादशाहों से मिला था वो गया, साथ में उनका पूरा दीवान भी गया। तो वो कहते हैं कि 50,000 अशार थे, वो गए, अब मैं तौबा कर लिया, मैंने लिखूंगा नहीं। लेकिन बाद में लोगों ने मुझसे थे, वो मुरीदों ने मजबूर किया काजी साहब को, तो उन्होंने ये दो चीज़ें लिखी। ये दो चीज़ों में उन्होंने जब फ़ारसी में लिखा ये वाक़या अपने लुटने का, तो वो मतलब इट इज़ इन पोइटिक फॉर्म, तो वो शेर में, फ़ारसी के शेर में वो लिखते हैं हैदराबाद की राह में लुटा मैं, और जब दक्कनी में लिखते हैं तो कहते हैं कि भागनगर की राह में लुटा मैं। बस अब तो इससे ज़्यादा सुकूत आपको नहीं चाहिए, क्योंकि एक अनबायस्ड सोर्स है, ये काजी साहब हैं, वहाँ के शायर हैं, वहाँ से आ रहे हैं, उनके साथ एक सानिया हुआ, तो लोग, आम लोग तो, और यही चीज़ यूरोपियंस ने भी लिखी है। इवन द यूरोपियन स्कॉलर्स, whoever have mentioned it, said that the Persians call it Hyderabad, while the locals call it भागनगर। अब बाज़ लोगों ने इसको भागनगर बनाने की कोशिश की, बाज़ लोगों ने इसको भाग्यानगर बनाने की कोशिश की, ये कई चीज़ें होती हैं। जहाँ तक रहा भागवती का सवाल, मैं उसको तारीख़ी वो हिस्टोरिकल फिगर नहीं मानता, मगर आई एम वेरी प्राउड टू कॉल हर एज एंड द लव स्टोरी एज अ वेरी इम्पॉर्टेंट facet of my culture। मेरे शहर की तारीख़ के लिए भागमती और मोहम्मद कुली, और इसमें एक आप अगर वो भी देखें तो वो भी बहुत लंबी बहस हो जाएगी, फिर वो खुद मुश्तरी जो किताब है, जिसको लोग कहते हैं कि वो मगर उसमें शुरू में और आखिर में बादशाह, उसके बेटे, सब नाम बराबर हैं, आखिरी में भी हैदराबाद का जिक्र है। और आखिरी शेर जो वजी ने कहा है, उसने कहा कि अव्वल और आखिर पहचान, और उसके बाद कुछ जानो। शेर मुझे बुरा याद नहीं, मतलब है कि पर आप स्टार्ट और एंड पहचानिए, मतलब ये पहचानिए कि मैं हकीकत की बात कर रहा हूँ। तो चूँकि वो भागमती नहीं लिख सकता था, या जो भी नाम था मोहतरमा का नहीं लिख सकता था, तो उसने मुश्तरी लिख दिया। इसी कई सबूत हैं और ये कोई ज़्यादा ऐसी कंट्रोवर्सी नहीं थी, खामखा कंट्रोवर्सी बना दी गई है. It's a beautiful legend which I cherish as a Hyderabadi, as my elders have cherished, especially मखदूम को अगर आप प्यार से आँख भर आती है कमल खिलते हैं जब कभी लब पे तेरा नाम है वफा आता है. तो क्या है, शहर बाकी है मोहब्बत का नशा बाकी है. ये स्कॉल्ड चारमीनार द सिंबल ऑफ लव. शहर बाकी है मोहब्बत का नशा बाकी है, दिल भरी बाकी है दिलबारी नारी है जहाँ बाकी है. सरे फहरिस्ते क्या है निगाह सरे फहरिस्ते समथिंग तू नहीं है तेरी चश्मे निगरां बाकी. तो जब मखदूम को कोई उसमें तकल्लुफ नहीं था तो मुझे भी नहीं रहा. थैंक यू.
Thank you very much, sir, for clarifying our doubts. Now I invite Master Shoaib Ahmed, Head Boy, Hyderabad Institute of Excellence, to present a memento to our esteemed chief guest as a token of love and appreciation. Thank you very much for presenting the memento. Now I call upon Master Abdul Muqeed to present vote of thanks.
A very warm and graceful good afternoon to our most valued chief guest, Sir Sajjad Shahid sir, and honorable guests, management committee, and worthy teachers, council members, and my dear friends. It's my privilege to propose vote of thanks and the contribution of those who have worked hard to make this event successful. First of all, I would like to thank our principal ma'am, Ms. Prabhavati ma'am, for giving me this opportunity, a wonderful opportunity. And I also thank the guest of honor of today's event, Sir Mr. Sajjad Shahid sir, and honorable guest, for spending his valuable time and sharing his valuable experience. And I would also extend my thanks to my dear friends for such a beautiful cooperation in making this event a resounding success. So thank you one and all, and announce that the program is over. Hope we meet you soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.